a mother of many children, took in a lost old woman. And 6 months later, she heard a knock on the door and couldn't hold back her tears. Thea hurried home. Today, of all days, the power went out at work during lunch, and after her shift, she had to work an extra hour. The management didn't care that some of the employees had children, others had second jobs, and some missed long-awaited dates. Thea had 4 people waiting for her at home. She always wanted a big, strong family. She got married but didn't get along with her mother-in-law. However, Thea didn't pay much attention to that because her husband seemed to be the best man in the world and supported her in everything. They agreed from the start that they would have no fewer than 3 children and ended up with 4. The last 2 girls were twins. Although, agreed from the start might not be the right phrase. Thea and Luis met at a lively and noisy university party. She was standing by the window, watching the city, when a young man approached her with a cheerful smile. "This place is kind of weird, isn't it?" Luis drew her attention with his liveliness. Thea smiled, appreciating his carefree attitude. "Yes, but there are some interesting people here." "Have you found anything interesting?" "Well, besides you, of course," he made a playful compliment. "I think you can find a lot of interesting things here if you know where to look." Their conversation lasted until morning, and Thea realized they hadn't even exchanged contacts. They talked about music, literature, art, and found so many common interests that she was surprised how quickly it happened. A few weeks later, Thea and Luis started dating, and each date strengthened their bond. They shared their dreams and ambitions, fears and hopes. But soon it became clear that they had different views on the future. One day, while walking in the park, a lighthearted conversation quickly turned serious. "Thea, you have no idea how much I love my freedom. I don't think it's the right time for kids." Luis looked at her regretfully. "But Luis, I've always dreamed of having a family, children, 3 or 4 even." She tried to express her feelings but trailed off. "I know, and I want to give you everything you want and deserve. But not now. I still have many plans I want to accomplish." Thea felt her heart clench. She understood his fears and desires, but also felt that children were their shared future. However, she couldn't make Luis change his mind overnight. A few weeks after their breakup, Thea found out she was pregnant. She decided not to contact Luis, fearing his reaction, but a mysterious package with roses and a note appeared on her doorstep. "For my beloved Thea." She opened the note with trembling hands. "Thea, I know I might seem selfish, but I can't imagine you going through this alone. I'm here for you, no matter what our future holds. Let's decide together what to do next. Love, Luis." Thea felt a mix of joy and anxiety. Maybe their mutual friends had spread the news. She wished Luis could be there with her at that moment. But alongside this intense desire, a storm of misunderstanding, doubts, and questions arose inside her. Could she accept his support? She hesitated briefly before dialing his number. "Luis, I'm pregnant," she said, struggling to hold back tears. There was silence on the other end, and she heard his heavy sigh. "Thea, honestly, I didn't expect this. But it doesn't change my feelings for you. We'll get through this together. I'm sorry for the stupid things I said. I'll shift my plans by about 9 months, right?" Each day brought them closer. Luis carefully monitored her condition, took care of her, and helped with every little thing. He tried to be her support despite his doubts and fears. Although they had misunderstandings and arguments, love and the desire to be together ultimately prevailed. Ray was born, followed by Austin, and the boys became the center of their world. Luis, in love with his sons, changed diapers, rocked them in his arms, and played with them on the floor. Thea watched these moments with a warm smile on her face, feeling that their family had become complete and happy. However, the relationship with her stern mother-in-law cast a shadow over everything. She believed Theo was unworthy of her son, blaming her for breaking him and not becoming the man she wanted him to be. This misunderstanding and alienation often caused Thea anxiety and nervousness, but she tried not to show it to Luis to avoid causing him additional problems. After the birth of Larry and Lacey, the family atmosphere became even more tense. Firstly, there was the mother-in-law. Day and night, she nagged Thea, saying she had ruined her son's life. He's only 30, still so much to see and try in life. And you've saddled him with a bunch of kids and you're happy. If you have no brains, you should at least listen to what people tell you. Secondly, they had so many children. How could they give them all an education, housing, and a good start in life? They couldn't. They couldn't buy 4 apartments or pay for a proper education. So, they created poverty and there was nothing to be happy about. Thirdly, if Thea thought that her mother-in-law wouldn't open her son's eyes to another life, she was greatly mistaken. Thea didn't argue, she agreed with everything, just to avoid angering her husband's mother even more. But it was in vain. She probably should have taken a stick and chased her out of the house, but Thea was young and naive. She believed that she and her husband could overcome everything. When the girls were 5 months old, Luis said he was leaving. Thea was stunned, confused, and didn't believe it. Leaving? Where to? Well, actually, you should be the one to leave. You understand, most of the money for the apartment came from my parents. Lou, have you lost your mind? What about the kids? Well, you wanted a lot of children. But they are your children too. Thea, I know everything you're going to say, understand, word for word, but it won't change anything. I've made my decision, and my mother. Thea sat down in a chair. Your mother? What does she have to do with this? You have your own family now. You wanted a big family yourself. Thea, I was wrong. Pack your things, I'll take you to Grandma's house tomorrow. Where? Have you thought about how I'll manage with the children there? No one has lived there for 10 years. Luis shrugged. Well, my mom and I can give you a small sum for repairs. A small one, of course. It took Thea a long time to pull herself together, but then she shook herself, looked around, and soon enough, the day came when Thea found herself alone with 4 children in front of the house, which was her only real possession. Grandma's house, steeped in old memories and dilapidation, became both her refuge and her challenge. After Luis and his mother evicted Thea and the children from the house, she found herself on the doorstep, not knowing where to start. The neighbor, elderly Mrs. Mildred, became her only support. She helped Thea with simple advice and support, and sometimes with her old tools, which themselves needed repair. The first step was to clear the house of old junk. Thea and the children dragged trash from the rooms, swept dusty piles from old corners, and counted cobwebs, and screamed together every time they bumped into the tiny guardians of the house. The whole process was accompanied by children's exclamations and mixed feelings, sadness for the past, hope for a new beginning, and inevitable difficulties. Thea stood on a ladder, holding paint in one hand and a brush in the other. She looked at the ceiling, covered with old stains from time and water leaks. Mrs. Mildred stood below, holding the ladder. Are the children asleep? Mrs. Mildred asked, looking up worriedly. Thea nodded, smiling reassuringly. Yes, finally. It was hard for them to get used to the new place after everything that happened. Don't worry, dear. You will manage. I see how diligently you all are working on this house, Mrs. Mildred replied, handing Thea another can of paint. Thea took the can and winked gratefully at the elderly helper. Thank you for helping me with all this. I don't know what I would do without you. No need to thank me. It's so little compared to what you've already been through, Mrs. Mildred answered and looked at the ceiling. Let's start from this side. Thea nodded and began to apply the paint to the ceiling, trying to do it evenly. It was hard for her to concentrate because of her thoughts about the future. But she knew that this house was the only thing left for her and the children after the death of her grandmother, who had replaced both mother and father for her. Dear, are you sure you can handle this? Mrs. Mildred asked, watching Thea with concern. The woman smiled weakly. Yes, I will definitely handle it. If nothing else, I can certainly paint the walls and the ceiling. The room fell silent for a moment. You are such a strong woman, dear. I am sure that you and the children will be fine, said Mrs. Mildred, and went to the wall to help Thea with another part of the ceiling. When the house was in a more or less decent order, Thea gathered all the papers and filed for child support. What a commotion that caused. Luis and his mother visited her like they were going to work. They threatened her with everything. When her former mother-in-law said they would take the children away from her, Thea smirked. That's right, let them live with their father in the comfortable apartment, and I'll visit them on weekends. I actually like that idea. Her mother-in-law recoiled and ran outside without saying another word. From that day on, no one bothered Thea. Child support payments came regularly, though they were minimal, probably due to her mother-in-law's intervention. But Thea had no intention of fighting for an increase, nor did she have the strength. Mrs. Mildred agreed to look after the children for a small fee in the form of children's smiles and hot tea with evening conversations, and Thea finally went to work. In general, now that it had been 3 years since Luis abandoned them, Thea was even grateful to him. No more nerves during his mother's visits. She had become more confident in herself. The family lived quite well. They planted a small garden. Thea worked, received benefits and child support. In general, life was good. Of course, everyone wants more, but Thea was quite content. Since Larry and Leslie started going to kindergarten, things got even better. The girls were hardly ever sick, and Thea could work full-time. She turned to the bus stop, looked at her watch, and sighed. Her job was great, well paid, not tiring to the point of exhaustion. Only the transportation was a real problem. The last bus was at 7 p.m., and after that, it was either walk or take a taxi. It was almost 8, and there was nothing to do. She couldn't afford the luxury of a taxi, so she had to walk. She would cross the pedestrian bridge, and from there it was just a short walk, about 20 minutes. Almost immediately after the bridge, Thea noticed an elderly woman. She was sitting on a bench, looking lost. She was dressed strangely, as if someone had given her expensive good clothes that were long worn out. The old woman looked so pitiful that Thea simply couldn't walk by indifferently. She always treated elderly people with reverence, remembering her grandmother who raised her since she was 10. "Hello, are you all right?" The old lady looked at her and smiled. "Yes, probably. I'm just sitting here, resting. There's nowhere to walk me home, dear. I live on the street. I probably used to live somewhere, but I forgot where." Thea was confused. "But how is that possible? We need to go to the police." Thea was at a loss. "But how can that be? You need to go to the police." The old woman waved her hand. "I've been there. They chase me away, tell me to drink less, but I don't drink at all, not at all." T was completely confused. She understood that the woman before her was one of those so-called homeless, possibly even thrown out by her own children. But this old lady was neither brazen nor angry. She was sad and lost. T clearly understood that she couldn't just leave her on the street. "You know what? Why don't you come with me?" "Where to?" The old lady looked at her fearfully, and T's heart tightened. It seemed that the woman hadn't seen any kindness from people recently, hence her fear. "Come on. My name is T. I live nearby. I'll introduce you to my children, and we can have dinner together. Don't be afraid." The old lady's eyes warmed. "But I'm dirty, just look at me. And you have children, you said. We'll fix that problem. We'll find something for you to wear, and if necessary, we'll heat up the bath." T smiled and took the woman by the arm. "Let me help you." They reached home surprisingly quickly. The children ran to hug their mother as soon as they saw her. "Mom, who's this?" "This, my dears, is Grandma." T hesitated, and the guest, smiling, completed the introduction. "Grandma Lucinda. You can call me Lucy." Grandma Lucy got lost, so she'll stay with us for a while, and we'll try to help her. Little Larry took the old lady by one hand and Leslie by the other, leading her to the table. Austin pulled out a chair, and Ray set a clean plate. "Oh, wait a moment, my dear ones, I need to wash up." Half an hour later, they were all sitting at the table. Grandma was asking the children about their activities and helping Leslie with her spoon. Usually, T couldn't manage to help both children and eat herself, but now she was surprised to find that she had eaten and the children were fed. The first time leaving for work and leaving the children with a nearly stranger was frightening. Grandma Lucy, who was sitting and darning a sock with glasses borrowed from a neighbor, seemed to understand without words. "T, I understand your worries. You should stop by Mildred, have her come over sometimes. They are children, after all, and it's natural to worry about them." T smiled. "You are very insightful and kind. I feel like we're so lucky to have found you." A week later, T couldn't imagine how they had managed without Grandma Lucy before. She fussed over the children like a mother hen. She told the girls bedtime stories that made them rush to bed on their own. The boys settled nearby on the couch to listen. Interestingly, Grandma Lucy had categorically taken over the cooking. "You know what? I'll do the cooking. I'll make a list of what to buy, because you rush in and cook in a hurry. Not only is it not economical, but the food is such that it's made quickly, and children need to be fed deliciously so they remember how good it was in childhood with their mom. But you might get tired." Lucy looked at her in surprise. "From what? From cooking something?" "Oh, don't worry." Soon, the house was filled with warmth and the aroma of fresh baking. One Saturday morning, when T had already left for work, Lucy gathered the children in the kitchen. "Today we're going to bake pies," she announced with a smile. "It's not only delicious, but also fun." Ray and Austin watched Grandma with interest, while the girls, Larry and Leslie, jumped with joy. "Can I roll out the dough?" asked Larry, brimming with energy. "Of course, dear. And Leslie can help me with the filling," Lucy replied kindly. Austin and Ray weren't left without tasks. Grandma assigned them to mix the ingredients for the dough. Austin took the bowl of flour, and Ray added sugar and yeast. "Remember, children, it's important to do everything with love," said Lucy, looking at her newfound grandchildren warmly. "Only then will the food turn out truly delicious." The children worked enthusiastically. Ray carefully mixed the ingredients, while Austin added water, trying not to spill a drop. "Grandma, why do you cook so well?" asked Austin as the dough began to rise. "You know, when I was young, my mother taught me to cook. We often spent time together in the kitchen, and it seems those moments were the happiest in my life, at least the part one can still remember," Lucy replied, patting the boy on the head. "And you'll do the same with your children someday." Larry and Leslie were happily rolling out the dough. The girls laughed as it stretched under the rolling pin. "Leslie, add some flour so the dough doesn't stick," advised Lucy, heading over to the girls. The little one sprinkled flour on the table, and they continued working. The filling for the pies was ready: apples, cinnamon, and a bit of sugar. The girls skillfully spread it over the dough. "Can I try a piece of apple?" asked Leslie, looking at Grandma with a smile. "Of course, but not too much," laughed Lucy. "We need enough filling for all the pies. And you don't want to spoil your appetite." Larry carefully placed apples on the dough, then sprinkled them with cinnamon and sugar. "Look, Grandma, I'm making a pattern," said Larry proudly, showing how neatly she arranged the apples. "Very beautiful, dear," praised Lucy. "Now we roll the dough like this, so the filling doesn't fall out." After the pies were formed and placed in the oven, the children eagerly awaited the results. "Grandma, how long will they take to bake?" Ray asked impatiently. "About half an hour," Lucy replied, patting his head. "In the meantime, let's tidy up the kitchen. It's always nicer to work in a clean space." The children quickly set to cleaning. Austin washed the dishes, Ray wiped the tables, and Larry and Leslie swept the floor. In a few minutes, the kitchen was sparkling clean again. "Grandma, when will we make something else?" asked Leslie, finishing the cleanup. "Next time, we'll bake cookies," Lucy replied with a smile. "I knew you were little bakers. Or maybe just sweet tooths, huh?" The girls laughed, their cheeks rosy with excitement. When the pies were ready, the whole house filled with their delightful aroma. Lucy took the baking tray out of the oven, and the children eagerly watched the hot, golden brown pies on the table. "Careful, they're still hot," Lucy warned, but Larry and Lassie had already taken small pieces, trying not to burn themselves. This is so delicious, Grandma," exclaimed Larry, licking his fingers. "Yes, this is the best pie in the world," added Lassie, smiling through a mouthful of pie. "Grandma, you're a real magician," said Austin, hugging Lucy. "I want to learn to cook just like you." "Of course, you will, dear. Everything comes with practice," replied Lucy, gently watching Ray devour another pie. When Thea came back from work, she found the children and Grandma Lucy at the table, enjoying the fresh pies. "Mom, look what we made," exclaimed Larry, running up to Thea with a plate of pie. "Smells delicious," smiled Thea, tasting a piece. "You're real chefs." "It's all thanks to Grandma teaching us," Austin said proudly, hugging Lucy. "Thank you, Lucy," Thea said, sitting down at the table, feeling warmth and coziness fill her heart. "You have no idea how important this is to us. Dear, family is the most important thing. We need to support each other," Lucy replied, taking Thea's hand. So the house became filled with pies, various soups. Money, by the way, was indeed being spent much more economically, and also Lucy scolded Thea. "You're so beautiful, you provide for yourself, but you shy away from men. You need to think about yourself too." Thea laughed. "What men? I have 4 kids to take care of." 4, not 1. "So what, you're going to bury yourself? Your kids are smart, healthy. What's wrong?" At such moments, Thea wanted to hug Lucy and say, "Okay, Mom, I'll do everything you say." Of course, she kept silent, but she did listen to Grandma's advice. A month later, Ray, the eldest, brought a commendation from his teacher. She wrote that recently her son had improved a lot in his studies and had become more disciplined. Thea saw that the boy was doing everything by himself. But it was Grandma Lucy who told him that a real man should be good at everything, not just studying. So Ray and Austin asked their mom for kids' woodbending kits. The kitchen now had wooden trivets. Thea couldn't help but smile every time she noticed them. Grandma Lucy had been living with them for 6 months. Thea sincerely felt sorry for her, but deep down she knew that if no one was looking for her, it would be just fine. How would she manage without heartfelt evening talks over a cup of tea, the girls without their bedtime stories, and neighbor Mildred without new pie recipes? But Thea also understood. Every day Grandma Lucy remembered something new from her past life. Sometimes she and her son were at the theater. Sometimes he gave her a trip. It seemed she had no quarrels with her son. She just got lost. Gradually, Grandma Lucy became calmer and happier. The house was filled with laughter and the cheerful voices of children who surrounded her with care and attention daily. Sometimes, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, Lucy was suddenly overwhelmed by memories of long-forgotten moments of her life. One morning, when the children were at school and Thea was at work, Lucy was alone in the kitchen. She started washing the dishes when she suddenly smelled a familiar aroma. It was the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls, which took her back to the distant past. How long ago that was, Lucy whispered softly, closing her eyes and inhaling the aroma. In her mind's eye, she saw a scene, her younger self standing in the kitchen of her old house, baking rolls for her son. "Mom, can I have one?" asked the little boy, peeking from behind the door. "Of course, dear," Lucy replied, smiling. It was her son, Elliot, when he was only 6 years old. He always loved her baking and often helped in the kitchen. Just like Ray and Austin. The memory was so vivid and alive that Lucy almost teared up. At that moment, Mrs. Mildred knocked on the door. "Good morning, Lucy," greeted the neighbor. "Is everything all right?" "Good morning, Mildred," Lucy replied, wiping her tears. "Yes, just memories overwhelmed me." "That's good, dear," Mrs. Mildred said gently, sitting down next to her. "Will you tell me about them?" Lucy took a deep breath and began to share. She recalled how she and Elliot went to the sea, how he learned to ride a bike, and how they celebrated Christmas together. "He was always so curious and inquisitive," Lucy smiled. "We read a lot together, and he loved listening to my stories." "What happened next?" Mrs. Mildred asked carefully, trying to bring out more memories from Lucy. I don't remember," Lucy shook her head. "It's all like a fog. But I know I loved him more than anything in the world." The next few days passed quietly, but the memories kept returning. Lucy remembered going to the theater with her son, the gifts he gave her for her birthday, and how they faced difficulties together. Each memory was like a piece of a puzzle gradually forming a complete picture. One evening, when Thea returned from work, she noticed Lucy sitting by the window, thoughtfully gazing at the sunset. "Is everything all right, Lucy?" Thea asked, sitting down next to her. "Yes, dear," Lucy replied, turning to her. "I've started remembering my life, my son. I'm so glad these memories are coming back to me. Maybe I should live a bit longer in this world." Inside Thea, conflicting emotions battled. On one hand, she was happy for Lucy that she was finally finding solace in her memories. On the other hand, fear was gradually taking hold of her heart. What if, when all her memories return, Lucy decides to go to her son and leave their home? "This is wonderful, don't talk nonsense, it's much too early for you to die," Thea said with a childlike smile, hugging her. "We're all here for you to help." "Thank you, Thea," Lucy replied, holding the woman tightly in her arms. "Your family has become my own. Maybe I forgot everything just to find you." Lucy's words were comforting, but the fear didn't go away. Thea knew she had to support Lucy and be happy for her progress, but thoughts of a possible future troubled her. Soon the children returned home, and Lucy told them about her memories. Ray and Austin listened with interest, asking questions and making their own assumptions about what their grandmother's life was like before. Larry and Lassie, sitting on Lucy's lap, listened intently to every word. "Grandma, you're so strong and brave," Larry said, hugging her. "Yes, we're proud of you," added Lassie. "Thank you, my dears," Lucy replied. "You are such wonderful kids. Only real princesses can be as kind and beautiful as you." In the evening, after the children went to bed, Lucy sat in the kitchen with Thea, sipping hot tea. "You know, Thea," Lucy began, "I'm starting to believe that our memories stay with us forever. Even if they disappear for a while, they still find their way back." "I think so too," Thea smiled. "And I'm glad you're restoring your story. And we'll always be here to support you." "Thank you, dear. You have become like a daughter to me," Lucy said, feeling deep gratitude and love for this amazing woman and her children. These words enveloped Thea like a warm blanket, but a shadow of anxiety still hung over her soul. Whatever happened in the future, she knew that the most important thing now was to support Lucy and be grateful for every day spent together. Winter came, and the house was filled with warmth and coziness. However, with the first colds came illnesses. Little Austin caught the flu. He had a fever and a constant cough. Thea was worried, not knowing how to help her son. His condition was getting worse, his temperature was rising, and the anxious mother was beside herself. "Mom, Austin is very sick," Ray said, running up to Thea with worried eyes. The woman rushed to her son's bed. Austin lay there, breathing heavily, his face burning. "My God, Austin," Thea whispered, feeling a lump in her throat. Lucy approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thea, let me stay with Austin," the grandmother offered. "You need to rest, otherwise, God forbid, you'll get sick too." "But Lucy, I can't leave him." He's so weak, Thea replied, barely holding back her tears. Dear, I've seen many illnesses and know how to deal with them. At least I remember that. So there's no room for argument here. I'll stay with him and you get some rest. Your strength is needed by the children just as much as medicine is. Thea nodded, though reluctantly, understanding that Lucy was right. She was tired and knew that if she continued like this, she would collapse from exhaustion. Lucy took over caring for Austin, surrounding him with warmth and attention. She sat by his bed, telling stories and singing old melodies she knew from childhood, while reminding the boy about hot milk with honey, which he reluctantly sipped. Grandma Lucy, tell me another story, Austin asked weakly, hugging his stuffed toy. Of course, dear, Lucy replied, stroking his head. You know, when I was little, my grandmother told me a story about a brave boy who overcame all his fears. Every evening, when Thea came to check on her son, Lucy gave her advice and shared her experience. Thea, try giving him this herbal infusion. It always helped me with colds, Lucy suggested, handing her a cup of warm drink. Thank you, Lucy, Thea replied gratefully. You can't imagine how much your help means to me. We're family, and we must support each other in difficult times, Lucy said softly, hugging Thea. But Austin's illness turned out to be more serious than they thought. At night, his condition worsened, and Lucy, noticing this, immediately woke Thea. Dear, we need to go to the hospital, she said, trying not to panic. He's getting worse. With trembling hands, Thea put a jacket on Austin, and they, together with Lucy, went to the hospital. Despite Thea's attempts to persuade the grandmother to stay home, she wouldn't agree. They left the other children in the care of Mildred, who had been suffering from insomnia for years. The road seemed endless. Every moment Thea felt her heart breaking from anxiety. At the hospital, the doctors quickly took Austin, leaving Thea and Lucy to wait in the corridor. Minutes felt like hours. Thea couldn't stay still, constantly pacing back and forth. Everything will be fine, Thea, Lucy reassured her. Austin is a strong boy, he will make it. Finally, the doctor came out of the room. Your son is stable, but he will need a few days under observation, he said, and Thea felt relieved. The few days spent in the hospital were a real test. Lucy never left Austin, telling him stories and singing songs to distract him from the pain and fear. Thea was there too, trying to be strong for her son, but often tears could be seen in her eyes. Mom, I'm feeling better, Austin said weakly, holding Thea's hand. Thank you for being here. I will always be here, darling, his mother replied, hugging the boy. When Austin finally returned home, he was still weak, but a smile never left his face. Throughout this period, Lucy was by his side, helping not only with the sick child, but also supporting the other children, who were also worried about their brother. Grandma Lucy, will Austin get better? Asked Lassie, snuggling up to Lucy. Of course, dear, Lucy replied confidently. We will all help him, and he will definitely get better. The main thing is to be there and not lose faith. And eat well to be strong and not get sick. What, little rascal, do you think I didn't notice the uneaten porridge? Lucy laughed, and a blushing Lassie tried to hide her smile, avoiding her grandmother's gaze. A few days later, Austin's condition started to improve, and Thea finally breathed a sigh of relief. Those days spent with Lucy, despite the difficulties, seemed to take her back to her childhood when her caring grandmother tenderly took care of her during illnesses. It had been several months since Grandma Lucy had moved in with Thea. During this time, they had become inseparable, learned a lot about each other, and their mutual support became the foundation of a strong friendship. One evening, when the children were already asleep, Thea and Lucy sat on the veranda, enjoying the cool summer breeze. Lucy was knitting, and Thea, holding a cup of hot tea, gazed thoughtfully at the stars. You know, Lucy, I never thought I could talk to someone like this, other than my grandmother, Thea began, breaking the silence. What do you mean, dear? Lucy asked, looking up from her knitting. About life, about children, about how to cope with difficulties, Thea replied. I thought I had to be strong for everyone, always. But with you, I can just be myself. Lucy smiled, putting her knitting aside. I'm also glad I found you and your family, dear. You've become like a daughter to me. You teach me many things, like patience and compassion. And you seem to have brought my youth back. Playing with your little ones is a pleasure. Of course, sometimes it's hard to imagine how you managed here alone with such a lively bunch. Thea lowered her eyes, feeling tears welling up. It's not easy, Lucy. Sometimes I feel so helpless. There are times when I don't know how to provide for the children, how to protect them from all the evil in the world. But you remind me that the most important thing is love and support. And you give your children exactly that, Lucy said softly. They are happy because they have you. And you are not alone, you have us. Thea took Lucy's hand and squeezed it. Thank you, Lucy. Your support means the world to me. You know, you've taught me to find joy in little things and to appreciate what I have. We both learn from each other, Lucy smiled. I see how you become stronger and more confident every day. Their warm conversation gave them strength, but it couldn't fully illuminate the reality. A couple of days later, when Thea felt particularly overwhelmed by financial problems, Lucy found her sitting on the back porch, hugging her knees. Thea, what's wrong? Lucy asked with concern, sitting down beside her. It's all so complicated, Lucy, Thea sighed. I'm trying my best, but sometimes it feels like it will never end. Constant bills, taking care of the children. It's so hard. It's as if I'm not meant for this. Who would need me like this? Lucy placed a hand on Thea's shoulder. Lift that chin up quickly. You're not just a woman, Thea, you're a mother, first and foremost. And you're a wonderful mother. I admire your strength and courage. For heaven's sake, remember you're not alone. We'll get through this together. But how? Thea asked, unable to hold back her tears. How do we cope when it feels like everything is falling apart? Step by step, day by day, Grandma replied gently. There are no trials in our lives that we can't handle. You're stronger than you think. They hugged, and Thea felt as if she was once again in the embrace of her beloved grandmother. Every time Thea felt her strength waning, Lucy was there to remind her of her own strength and courage. Lucy's warm voice was a salvation from all troubles. When Thea came home after another hard day at work, she saw Lucy tending to the garden in the yard. Grandma was caring for the flowers, carefully trimming the wilted petals and watering the soil. Thea approached her, feeling joy at the sight of the well-kept garden. What a beautiful garden we have, Thea said, sitting down on the bench. I had completely neglected it, and your hands work miracles. Thank you, dear, Lucy replied with a smile. It reminded me of the little garden we had at home with Ellie. As a boy, he loved helping me with the flowers. Can you imagine? All the boys played war games, but he was digging in the dirt with his mom. And he was as happy as could be. Lucy laughed, and Thea thoughtfully looked at the flowers. I also want to learn to find joy in such simple things, she admitted. Sometimes it feels like life passes by in the hustle and bustle. Start with small steps, Lucy suggested, sitting down next to her. Find time for yourself, even just a few minutes a day. It's fun with the little ones, but don't forget about yourself either, dear. Listen to me. I'll try, Thea nodded, realizing that Lucy was completely right. Later that evening, when the children were already asleep, Thea and Lucy went out onto the veranda to enjoy the coolness of the night after the heat from spending time at the kitchen stove. Thea looked at the stars and suddenly remembered one of her favorite fairy tales, which she often read to her children when they were very little. Lucy, do you like fairy tales? She asked, turning to her companion. Yes, of course, Lucy replied with a smile. I used to read a lot to my son. Fairy tales always held a special place for us. Would you like to hear one of them? Thea offered, feeling warmth from the memories awakening inside her. With pleasure, Lucy nodded. Thea began to tell a fairy tale she knew by heart. It was the story of a little prince who traveled across worlds in search of the meaning of life and friendship. Lucy listened with interest, sometimes asking questions and making her own comments. "This tale is so beautiful and wise," Lucy said when Thea finished. "It reminds me how important it is not to lose faith and always seek our place in the world." "Yes," Thea agreed. "Sometimes life seems complicated and confusing, but such stories help us find answers and not give up. My grandmother wrote this tale for me." Lucy hugged Thea, who had tears welling up in her eyes. The woman hugged the old lady back even tighter, trying to convey all her love through this touch. But it couldn't last forever. One day, Thea came home from work and immediately knew something had happened. Grandma was sitting at the table, the children were quietly settled on the couch, and a piece of paper with some numbers lay in front of Lucy. "Thea," I remembered, "this is my Elliot's number. He always made me repeat it. I need to call him, they must be worried about me." Thea almost burst into tears, but resignedly took out her phone. An hour later, after they had sat in silence, footsteps were heard on the porch, and a man literally burst into the house. "Mom!" He fell to his knees in front of Lucy, burying his face in her hands. Thea saw his shoulders shaking. He was about 45 years old, maybe a little older. Gray temples, fashionable clothes, and the scent of good cologne. "Grandma, will you come to visit us?" Austin was trying his best to hold back, but he couldn't. The guest looked at the children clinging to their tearful grandmother, then looked at Thea. "Of course she will, I'll bring her to visit you myself." Elliot kept his word. Within a week, they came to visit, bringing a whole carload of gifts. The mysterious Elliot turned out to be a very wealthy man. Thea had been busy all morning preparing the house, tidying up and making treats. The children were also excited, their faces glowing with anticipation of meeting their new friend. "Mom, is Elliot kind?" Lassie asked while setting the table. "Yes, he's kind," Thea smiled, adjusting the tablecloth. "Grandma Lucy says he's a good person." When the car appeared on the driveway, all the children ran outside. Thea felt her heart start to race. Elliot got out of the car, helping Lucy, and his face lit up with a smile at the sight of the children cheerfully greeting them. "Hello, little ones," Elliot exclaimed, squatting down to be at eye level with the children. "You all look so beautiful and happy." Lucy, holding Elliot's hand, approached Thea and gave her a warm hug. "Thea, thank you for your hospitality," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Oh, Lucy, you are not a guest here," Thea replied, trying to contain her emotions. "Come in, everyone, into the house." Elliot and Lucy brought with them a car full of gifts, which delighted the children. "Is all this for us?" Austin asked, unable to believe his eyes. "Of course, it's from me and Grandma Lucy," Elliot replied, taking boxes of toys and sweets from the trunk. When everyone went inside, Thea invited the guests to the table. Grandma Lucy sat next to the children, unable to escape from Lassie's grasp, while Elliot offered to help Thea set the table. "You've really done a lot here, Thea," Elliot remarked, looking around admiringly. "The house looks very cozy and warm." "Thank you," Thea replied, placing a dish of pies on the table. "We've been through a lot, but we managed." "I see that you're a strong woman," Elliot said, helping to set the dishes. "And your children are wonderful. You've created a real family." Throughout the evening, the house was filled with laughter and joy. The children excitedly examined the gifts. Lucy shared funny stories from her son's childhood, and Thea and Elliot sat nearby, watching the scene and exchanging awkward glances. "Austin, look what I found!" Larry exclaimed, pulling a beautiful toy horse out of a box. "Wow, cool!" Austin replied, his eyes shining with happiness. Lucy, sitting between the children, gently stroked their heads, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Children, you are the best," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Later, when Lucy went to put the little ones to bed, Thea and Elliot were left alone. They sat in the kitchen, enjoying the silence and talking. You know, Thea, Elliot said, his voice full of sincerity, I'm very happy to be here. Your family is wonderful, and I'm glad I can be a part of your life, even if just for one evening. We're also glad you're here, Thea replied, feeling her heart warm towards this man. Your presence means a lot to us. Lucy has become like family to us, and now you too. Elliot smiled. You know, Thea, I feel like this is just the beginning. Maybe we'll see each other more often, he said, gently touching her hand. I would like that very much, Thea replied softly, feeling a long-forgotten thrill inside. You are lucky, Thea, Elliot suddenly continued quietly, having children is such a blessing. Don't you have children? Unfortunately, no. I was married twice, but both wives wanted to have fun rather than have children. So, I ended up alone, but I really want to. You know, our family is small, just my mother and me. She almost died giving birth to me, and the doctors forbade her from having more children. My father passed away early, so it's just been us. But you're not old, a man in his prime. Get married, and you'll have children. Do you really think so? Of course. Thea turned out to be right. Within a year, Elliot got married, and children appeared in his life immediately, not 1, but 4. However, the happiness of the newlyweds was soon threatened. As soon as Louis and his mother learned that Thea had married a wealthy man, they reappeared on the horizon. At first, Thea couldn't understand what they wanted, but when she did, she decided to talk to her husband. Ellie, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband are threatening to take the children if I don't pay them. They seem to think that since I married you. Thea sank into a chair, exhausted, and fell silent. There was no need to continue. You see, all I bring you is problems. Elliot smiled. Take them from whom? From me? Let them try. And I don't want to hear such talk from you anymore. There are no your problems or my problems. We are one family. Remember that. Thea lowered her head. There's one more thing. It's not too late to fix it, but... Actually... Thea looked up at him with frightened eyes. Ellie, we didn't think about it. Soon, we'll have a 5th child in our family. Thea had never seen a 45-year-old man behave like a child before. Elliot performed an Indian dance, then tapped out a jig. And Grandma Lucy, not holding back her tears, happily crossed them both quietly.